So we're going to move on to our third presenter, and then after that, we'll do the Q&A. So we have Rachel Hostetter Smith from Taylor University. She's going to present Magnitude and Mystery, Maternity in the Work of Two Artists.
Okay, terrific. Thanks, Anne. All right, so I'll go ahead and try to share my screen here. And so I may just need to click through these as you're seeing them on the screen now.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks again. And this has just been amazing, even though I've only been able to sit in on several sessions yesterday and so far today. Just really remarkable presentations and so much intersection of ideas, including in the two presentations in this session by Ariana and Guinevere, even though theirs are on literary works and mine are on visual works. So as you mentioned, I teach art history at Taylor University, which is in Indiana in the U.S. My scholarship addresses broad issues at the intersections of art and religion with a special focus on contemporary and global art. My most recent publication is a collected volume titled Religion and Contemporary Art, A Curious Accord, that was published by Routledge in 2023. And I'm currently working on a project on contemporary art as pilgrimage with Kate Baruch, who's at GTU and Santa Clara University. And that's actually how I learned about this particular symposium, and it really piqued my interest. So this particular presentation is really a response to the question that was posed in the call for papers. What does it mean to give birth, to be born, to create, to be created, or to be natal? This presentation introduces the work of two distinctly different contemporary artists, Laura Stevenson and Lauren Frances Evans, both 30-something American women whose work in recent years investigates the significance of maternity. Significantly, their lived experience with infertility and miscarriage on the one hand, and pregnancy and birth on the other, naturally involved the existential, ontological, and spiritual implications of maternity that infuse their work as artists or creatives. Wherever possible in the presentation, I have included the artist's own words so that they can speak for their own thinking in producing this work. My own interest in art related to the topic of pregnancy and childbirth was piqued when I first saw some of Laura Stevenson's works in an exhibition in September of 2022 that were made in response to her own experience of infertility and miscarriage. I was struck by the way the work Unworn, the one that's on the screen now, powerfully captured the profound sense of loss she and her husband, Eric, had suffered as a result of two miscarriages that occurred in relatively close succession the previous year after a period of extended infertility. Stevenson is a mixed media artist who processes her experience of the grief of infertility and miscarriage through making art and sharing that experience through exhibition, workshops, and a documentary short titled The Art of Loss by filmmaker Kathy Bruner that was released in 2024. And there's actually a trailer online that you can take a look at for that. Stevenson's experience led her to research these topics to produce artwork that reflects not just her own, but the widespread, though seldom talked about, experience of so many others, giving form to the palpable experience of the absence of presence and perceptions of the sacred and sacramental nature of human life. In Stevenson's words, quote, "I was curious to try to make visible something that is largely invisible, the silent suffering of miscarriages," end quote. The ghostly impressions of baby clothes perfectly bodied forth the palpable reality of the absence of presence to present the persistent presence of absence that the loss of a child entails for a previously expectant mother. The anticipation of playtime and dressing up with toys and big, beautiful bows and tiny socks just right sized for baby feet, suddenly, very painfully dashed. The shadowy whites of the debossed paper sheets floating in white box frames suggested the shifting and modulated feelings of loss, mingling with longing, desire, struggling with against despondence and even despair. Even the title, Unworn, is the negation of something that otherwise should have been. Stevenson's deliberate designation of the pair of prints as a diptych, a term historically associated with small portable altarpieces designed for personal devotional use, emphasizes the hushed sense of the sacred the work projects. Immediately, when I saw this work, it called to mind another series of prints produced by a British artist, Elizabeth Quant, during an international artist residency I had facilitated in New Delhi, India, 2 years before, in early 2020 for the Indian arts organization Art for Change, which Stevenson had also participated in. According to Quant, her series, titled Missing Girls, seeks to understand the socio-political issues surrounding gendercide within an Indian context. The issue, which is intimately connected to the practice of dowry, is an ongoing concern in Indian society due to the growing gender imbalance and subsequent demand for girl brides who are being trafficked and bought from other towns, cities, and countries in demand for wives due to the practice of killing baby girls. In this work, Quant explains, I collected secondhand girls' dresses and exposed them to the Indian sunlight, creating a negative print. The work speaks of the absence of girls from Indian society and of the beauty of raising girls through the delicate lace patterns. Significantly, Quant placed her prints low to the floor to emphasize the small stature of little girls and their vulnerability. Her prints are called cyanotypes. A cyanotype is the earliest form of photographic print where the paper or fabric ground is coated with a chemical mix that turns a distinctive Prussian blue when exposed to UV light. The image is produced by placing objects on the treated ground, placing it in sunlight or under a UV lamp for 5 to 30 minutes, and washing the ground with water to develop the image, which appears as a negative against a blue background. Both Quant and Stevenson use actual children's clothing to create their prints, creating a direct connection between the image and the thing represented. But the choice of medium and process of making also adds meaning. In Quant's work, light literally exposes the unspeakable issue of missing girls that she is addressing. In Stevenson's diptych, submitting the objects positioned under a damp sheet of paper to the intense pressure of the roller of a printing press to create a physical impression, to use Stevenson's word, provides an apt correspondence to the physical and emotional pain of loss in miscarriage. Stevenson used the same blind embossing technique for an installation titled Carried But Never Held, which the blind embossing simply means no ink or foil is used, only an impression, or a depression in this case, is made. For these pieces, she glued together things like string, fabric, beans, rice, even some things that embryos are compared to in size. By using this technique, she was, quote, trying to bring visibility to something that is faint but present and may not readily be seen from a distance, she explains. The works are framed in circles of varying sizes as a collective grouping on the wall, symbolizing women's wombs and the millions of children lost through miscarriage that have been carried but never held. She continues. A closer look at individual impressions reveals Stevenson's perceptions of the magnitude and mystery of conception and birth that is at once individual and intimate and universal and of a cosmic scale. She writes, quote, "There are already so many unknowns of the mystery of life and what life forming and growing inside a woman's body actually looks like." Ultrasounds are helpful for doctors to measure the growth of the child, but also check for a heartbeat. The view of the ultrasound is often fuzzy, and you may be left wondering what all you are looking at. When making this work, Stevenson states, quote, "I was thinking about the simultaneous juxtaposition of the feeling of things coming together and falling apart for those who lose children in the womb. I also wanted to acknowledge that this is more than just about my story, a story that far too many women face, but one that is often experienced alone and silently." Stevenson's interest in heightening the public's awareness of the common yet surprisingly still silently suffered grief that results from miscarriage inspired the creation of this work, which she titled One in Four, in reference to the World Health Organization's estimate of the number of pregnancies that result in miscarriage, defined as the loss of a pregnancy before 28 weeks. Quote, "This work acknowledges the statistic that 1 in 4 known pregnancies ends in loss. 4 pairs of shoes hang in cubbies that form a circle, 3 clearly used and worn, and 1 pair still with its tag on them that says, 'Child of mine.'" Significantly, the 4 cubbies form not just a circle, a nearly universal symbol of unity, wholeness, and completion, but an implied Greek cross. In Christian tradition, the Greek cross with its 4 equal-length arms also represents the universal offering of God's grace to the entire world, referencing the 4 cardinal directions. The Greek cross form traces its origins to the Greek philosopher and mathematician Pythagoras, who adapted the Egyptian Ankh to represent the harmony of the universe in the 6th century BCE. Here, that harmony is disrupted by the one of the 4 pairs of shoes that are unworn. Shoes have no reason for being other than to serve the person needing to wear them. This is yet another poignant way of making palpably present that which is actually absent, the child who would have worn them. To borrow a literary reference, it is visual synecdoche, where the part is used to refer to the whole of something, to vividly conjure up that which is not presented in all of its fullness. In this work, titled We Will Carry You, Stevenson, a practicing Christian, uses an even more obvious religious reference to an altarpiece to present the sacred nature of the lives lost to miscarriage. When opened, the wings take on what Stevenson describes as an angel-like form, embracing her husband and Stevenson herself, cradling a dark form in the shape of a baby with 2 tiny pairs of baby shoes tucked into the recess below. Circular forms and hands supporting the family unit suggest something larger that is sustaining them in their grief. As she writes, "No woman dreams of losing a child and experiencing death in her body, yet this is a reality that many mothers face. Miscarriages are more than a loss of a pregnancy and the hope of a life, but the loss of a human being." This body of work explores both the celebration of life and tragedy of death in the womb, as I have discovered joy and sorrow to be far more related and intersecting than we might naturally assume. The circular forms in the orb at her womb, in particular, bring to mind Christian icons of Mary as Theotokos, literally the one who gives birth to God, with the Christ child presented in the circular form in her torso, a representation specifically known as Mary of the Sign. Representations of the Theotokos are understood as illuminating the mystery of the incarnation of Emmanuel, God with us, in the person of Jesus Christ. Mary is Cora Tau, translated as the container of the uncontainable, originates from the 6th century Akathist hymn composed in Constantinople, where the archangel Gabriel specifically, quote, marvels at the divine self-emptying and the renewal of creation, which will occur when Christ comes to dwell in the Virgin's womb, end quote. It is an image that merges body and spirit, the temporal with the eternal, birth and rebirth, not just for individual souls, but for a whole new creation, just as Stevenson's own work reflects a recognition of something of eternal magnitude in the life conceived in her womb. In 2023, Stevenson gave birth to a daughter, Vera, yet the impact of miscarriage persists. She is currently working on a series of ceramic forms created by dipping baby clothes, in this case infant onesies, in liquid porcelain clay slip and firing them in a kiln. In firing, the cotton fabric is burnt out, leaving a thin, fragile ceramic form of the garment in high detail as a hollow three-dimensional shell. She explains, quote, I imagine the void in space that would have been occupied by a child lost in the womb, and through these forms bringing a visible physical presence to that empty void of a body. The forms are fragile, sometimes exhibiting cracks from the high temperatures of the kiln, which relates to the fragility of the subject matter. Even after my daughter Vera was born, I was lamenting for my 2 other children. I found myself so incredibly grateful for Vera's life, but also longing to hold all 3 of my children. In contrast with the hushed, still, meditative solemnity of Laura Stevenson's work, reflecting the loss and persistent residue of grief that is the lived experience of many who experience miscarriage, the work of Lauren Frances Evans is blatantly visceral, hovering between rapture and repulsion in the way it presents bodily realities associated with pregnancy and birth in sharp and graphic focus, to make manifest the grandeur and mystery of the formation of flesh on bone, sustained by what poet Miloš Česlaw calls the running of the blood in his poem One More Day, that occurs in the life developing in the womb. Evans employs mixed media and digital technologies to produce works that are equally visceral and profound, reflecting the bodily realities of pregnancy and birth, that includes real sacrifice and risk undertaken to bring a new life into being. Reflective of her own experience of neurodiversity and a multiplicity of health challenges, Evans' artwork presents a heightened, multifaceted, and frequently multilayered sensory experience that includes sight, sound, and touch, with the sensibilities arising from a rich inner life. In works like Thinly Veiled and Transitional Object, Umbilical Knot 1, Evans uses lycra printed with bodily imagery, stuffed with fiberfill to make works that are remarkably realistic renderings of the flesh and blood, allowing for a glimpse of an arm to be seen through the translucent membrane on the left and the slippery wetness of bodily fluids to be seen in the representation of an umbilical cord on the right. The titles allude to the new life that can't yet be fully seen as it grows in the womb, and the undeniable tie that exists between mother and child even after it is cut, to allow the child to live on its own after birth. In relation to her exhibition at the University of Missouri's Bingham Gallery that just closed on February 28th, titled Umbilical Ouroboros, referencing an ancient symbol of a serpent swallowing its own tail, featuring themes of birth, relationship, and transformation, Evans explained, quote, I think of the umbilical cord as being this thing that connects us to our origins, whether physical or something beyond. Evans' work is not just visually graphic, but highly tactile. In another work that references the intimate dependent relationship of an infant on its mother, seen on the left, she used needle felted wool to create a small, roughly 3.5-inch in diameter sculptural form of a woman's breast with distended nipple encircled by an arm with the forms so intertwined that it's impossible to distinguish where mother ends and the child begins. Titled Transitioning, What's Mine is Yours, Evans presents the complex realities of connection and autonomy that obtain in the mother-child relationship. The unexpected fuzziness of what should be flesh is at once comforting and unsettling, evoking a visceral reaction not unlike surrealist artist Merritt Oppenheim's infamous sculpture Luncheon in Fur, where the forms of a teacup, saucer, and spoon are covered in animal fur. In contrast with the intimate scale of transitioning, what's mine is yours, Pupa, Sienna on the right, is monumental in size, 12 feet long, hanging like a giant cocoon from a high ceiling to reveal an oh-so-lifelike image of an infant's face, slightly squished and misshapen, looking as if it is about to emerge from a birth canal. The title, Pupa, suggests that what we are seeing is not just a transition, but a transformation, instead, where the metamorphosis of one thing into something quite other is taking place before our very eyes, where we are witness to miraculous transfiguration. Her figural sculpture and call, roughly the height of an average-sized woman, brings together the visceral realism of the printed lycra and caul infant, still encased in its amniotic sac. Literally translated as a veiled or wrapped birth, in this piece, two long needle-felted wool arms appear to dip and turn together as if in some slow cosmic ritual dance, holding aloft the infant as if in celebration and presentation to the heavens. Embedded in this work are ideas of protection and preservation, gift and offering. In a video piece titled Let It Shine, A Fire in My Belly, Evans makes manifest the profound mystery and cosmological implications of embodiment and of giving birth in motherhood and art making. The layered, evocative imagery and insistently stirring soundtrack represent Evans' own, quote, her experience of sensory overload and nonlinear thinking. Religious iconography, particularly representations of the Virgin Mary, also play a role as Evans reinterpreted maternal archetypes and faith from a contemporary perspective. It presents a merging of the life within the womb, the temporal world outside of the womb that is anticipated, and cosmological imagery implicating the mystery and magnitude of life itself that is found in the microcosm of a single person in its birth. The imagery and title, Let It Shine, A Fire in My Belly, calls to mind yet another version of Mary as Theotokos, container of the uncontainable, that I'll close with here, where Mary and the Christ, encircled in her body, are enclosed in flames, representing the appearance of God to Moses in the unburnt bush, that represent represents the power and holiness of God who is incarnate in the child born of Mary. In the work of Stevenson and Evanson's, we see a corresponding recognition of something inextinguishable in conception and birth, in creation that is both mysterious and immeasurable, that women experience in a very distinct and specific way. Thank you.